is being slowly destroyed by epidemic levels of crime, drug abuse.
We all know about the fall of Detroit, the San Franciscan dystopia, and the migrant crisis in New York City, but they are not the only mighty cities to fall. With inflation soaring and interest rates double and in some cases triple what they were in 2020, like a house of cards, city after city seems to be going downhill. But what about the cities that aren't on the news 24/7? Are there any cities that you should avoid moving to in 2024? Before you get lured in by the promise of a new job and cheap housing, let's look at some unexpected cities going downhill. Number 8 is Memphis, Tennessee. Once the state's biggest city, it was recently overtaken and far overshadowed by Nashville. Blues music is now just an ironically named anthem for the fallen city. While Beale Street still lures in tourists, even that is on the decline now that Nashville has captured the hearts of music lovers. Crime has riddled the city and is on the uptick. During 2022, Memphis saw a sharp increase with no sign of slowing down. Its violent crime rate is 4 times the national average and climbing. The city's own financials are no better than its crime statistics. Memphis has only $1.7 billion to pay $2.5 billion worth of bills. That means there's more than a $700 million shortfall. That's a huge burden on the taxpayer. It also means that the mayor has to make decisions about costly infrastructure repair and a failing education system. If there is no money to repair it, the city must decide if it invests a lot now for its future or saves the money now at the expense of revitalization. Number 7 is Anchorage, Alaska. Both the city of Anchorage and the entire state of Alaska have seen a decade-long pattern of population decline. What was once America's last frontier is now America's last feeling frontier. Birth rates are slowing and more people are leaving the city than coming in. This has led to an undersized workforce for the available jobs and less funding for schools as attendance numbers drop. Excess jobs should be a sign of growth for a city, but this labor disparity is sabotaging the city in ways that are leading to its decline. Anchorage, the state's largest city, has lost 18,600 working-age residents since 2013. That's 6.5% of the city's entire population. On the surface, it seems like this would be a sign to flock to the city for unprecedented job opportunities, but unfortunately, the deficit is so vast that the city is predicting years of stagnation and economic decline. Crime is no better for the city. In 2023, the violent crime rate was on the rise, with Native Alaskan women being particularly vulnerable. So while there may be a vibrant job market, unless tens of thousands of people all move to Anchorage at once, the city is facing a sharp decline in 2024. Number 6 is Hartford, Connecticut. Connecticut is one of the wealthiest states in the country, but its urban centers aren't immune to national economic trends like inflation, rising interest rates, and unaffordable housing. City officials say the city is $2 million in debt. When the current administration took over, they had $3 million in the bank, but ended up spending $2 million more on different projects, like improving the sewer system and a sidewalk project. While these projects were much needed, it nonetheless put the city in debt. Crime is no better for the city. It has been experiencing a notable spike in violent crimes, specifically homicides, over recent years, with the year 2022 having seen the most homicides in almost 2 decades, with more than twice the amount of homicides as New Haven and Bridgeport, 2 other cities with a less than stellar crime reputation. While most of Connecticut's cities were growing at a rate that far outpaced the state as a whole, Hartford saw a 3% decline in population over the past decade. Number 5 is Syracuse, New York. While New York City steals the limelight when it comes to homeless encampments, unaffordable housing, extremely high tax burdens, and extreme COVID lockdowns that have stagnated a generation of school children, we would be remiss to not mention the decline of Syracuse. Many of the root causes of Syracuse's persistent decline are common to all of Upper New York and the Northeast in general. Victims of the Rust Belt have been in perpetual decline, but Syracuse had some unique experiences that have caused it to be particularly downward trending as we head into 2024. The Syracuse region has suffered more job loss from July 2019 to July 2020 than 90% of large American metropolitan areas. A major manufacturing company closed its doors for good in March of 2023, in which everyone lost their jobs. The company says the reason for closure is economic, without any other details. The city is also plagued by high violent crime. Its high levels of violent crime have increased over the last decade. 440 individuals were murdered between 2001 and 2021. That's a lot for a city of less than 147,000. Number 4 is Dallas, Texas. While Dallas is a mecca for people fleeing California, the city is no paradise. Dallas has little fiscal stability with only $3.2 billion in assets despite owing $8.8 billion in bills. That means each Dallas taxpayer would have to pay $14,700 just to get the city out of debt. Construction is another problem in Central Texas. Crumbling infrastructure and poor roadways have been neglected. The upside is that the city is investing in its future, but the downside is that it's costing residents in the short run. The city desperately needs to tend to its infrastructure, but with a nearly $15,000 deficit per person, that won't be an easy sell to residents. It's a catch-22 of desperately needing road repairs, but also not wanting to bankrupt the city. The upside to Dallas is that the housing is relatively affordable for a city of its size. Unfortunately, the city will have to get worse before it gets better. Number 3 is Miami, Florida. This is a strange city. It still dominates the tourist industry, it still has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and it hasn't been in the news as much as New York or Chicago when it comes to cities on the decline. In fact, they've had amazing decades as well as some horrible decades. While they may currently be somewhere in the middle, it feels like it's on the decline. Crime is higher than both the state and national average with a crime index rate of only 8 out of 100, meaning it is safer than 8% of other cities and neighborhoods in the country. Crime isn't the only thing pushing this city on the decline. Rising costs of housing have been pricing people out as both locals and transplants struggle to keep up with rising interest rates and inflated home prices. The city is also struggling financially to stay afloat. Miami only has $542.9 million of assets available to pay bills totaling $2.5 billion. That means there is a $14,000 deficit per person, which is a burden on taxpayers. This debt affects the pensions of state and government workers like teachers and firefighters. The city took a particularly large hit during the pandemic when the tourism industry came to a screeching halt. Its one-time vibrant cruise ports sat empty as revenue dried up. Number 2 is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Once the capital of the US, a beacon of freedom, a tourist hotspot known for the Liberty Bell and cheesesteaks, the city has now been in the news recently for all the wrong reasons. It has been a hotspot for violent crime, which many cite as a natural result of earlier this year when Philadelphia City Council quietly removed $33 million that was set aside for the city's police department. The city agreed to eliminate a proposed $19 million increase to the police department after receiving criticism following George Floyd's death. While violent crime has been steadily decreasing alongside natural trends, the result of fewer police has been a dramatic rise in all other crime. Property crime incidents skyrocketed through August of 2023 compared to the same time in 2022, up by 24% per police data. Car thefts spiked a staggering 105%, and retail thefts jumped 34%. Philadelphia lost over 33,000 residents in 2020 and 2022, with that number on the continual decline, with the drop between 2021 and 2022 being the single biggest drop in 1 year since 1977. Following a decade of growth, the city seems like it's heading downwards as we head into 2024. And number 1 is Honolulu, Hawaii. Honolulu is the most expensive city in the US, and its locals and native Hawaiians have long since complained about being priced out of paradise. Though the city will likely always be a hub for tourism, the city is anything but a hub for locals. And to be fair, even tourism to the city has dropped by 7% over the last year. What's wrong, Honolulu? Earlier in 2023, E.M. Tongi charmed America when he auditioned for American Idol. He was the season's winner and first Pacific Islander to win the show. A native Hawaiian, he had been living in Washington State at the time of his audition. When the judges asked why anyone would ever leave Hawaii, he replied without skipping a beat, "Priced out of paradise." You shouldn't have to win American Idol to afford to move to a state that you are indigenous to, but that's the way it's looking for more and more former Hawaii residents who felt that they had to leave the state because of its high taxes and high costs of basic necessities such as housing, utilities, and groceries. Another problem plaguing the city is the homelessness crisis. As homelessness is on the rise and costs make getting into a home impossible, Honolulu is far from paradise heading into 2024.